Well, good morning, everybody. How are we doing? New year, new webinar, new style here. This is Jeremiah. We are going to do a Ask Us Anything. We thought it'd be very good, and of all the possible subjects to start with, definitely the plant schedule. But you'll be able to ask us about literally anything. We really wanted to just give this opportunity. We talked about it, and we just thought this would be an interesting subject category of a webinar. We plan on doing a few of these over the year, so we'll see. We really want you to just any question you might want. Kind of the only rule is, please, if you want us to answer the question, please ask it in the Q and A area. There's a little Q and A button at the bottom of your screen. You can click that, and that's where your questions go. As opposed to the chat is really more for you guys to talk amongst each other. You can be like, "Oh, hi, Steve. Good to see you here." Things like that. But if you want us to answer your question, that goes in the Q&A area. Though we are saying spotlight on plant schedules, you can, of course, ask us literally anything. We just thought that would be generally the subject matter, and we're prepared to show a lot of the new schedules and to address a lot of the questions we have been getting on that. But you literally are able to ask us literally anything. That's the rules of an Ask Us Anything. No question is too big, no answer is too big, right? So that being said, let me have Amanda kick this along.
Great. Yeah, I'm really excited about this too. It will probably, yep, now's probably a great time to introduce who's here today. So you've already heard Jer, he's our CEO and lead developer, and I'm Amanda Marin. And I know I've had the pleasure to speak to a lot of you guys already through tickets and conferences like the ASLA. So I'm here to answer a lot of questions. We also have Molly here. I think if you've been in one of my sessions or webinars, I've mentioned Molly. She's our horticultural guru who can answer anything technical about the plant database and that our schedules are pulling from. So Molly, how are you doing today? And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do here at Land Effects.
Thanks, Amanda. I'm doing really well today. And yeah, I just manage the plant database and also help with anything related to development of features around the plant database. And yeah, I'm really excited for this webinar to see, yeah, just how the schedule works.
Awesome. And we do also have some background support to help triage questions and provide answers in text format while we're going and answering things live. So as we go through, here's how we're thinking the session will be structured, but I already see a lot of questions coming in. So it's a new format and it'll be fun as we feel out the best balance of things that we've prepared and the questions you come up with. So we'll mostly just be using this outline to fill in time while we wait for questions, or we might ditch this entirely and just focus on your questions. We'll feel it out. We'll see what feels right. So with that, let's start with a quick introduction into our spotlight, which is plant schedules. And Jer and I and Molly can kind of talk about what we've put out there, and then we'll kind of jump straight into your questions. So you guys can get that Q&A box up right now if you haven't already, and you can actually see everybody's questions that are coming in. We are also trying out a Zoom feature to allow voting on questions. We'll see if that works. And so you can also help us triage common questions by looking at what's already in there and voting for it, if that works. If it doesn't work, maybe kind of pop into the chat and we can feel that out for the next Ask Us Anything too. So let's go ahead and switch over to CAD. We have a few drawings already pulled up and ready to go. So let's start over here with under plant schedule. If I just click this, let's see the main thing that's new. So the first thing you're going to see that's new is this schedule box. So in here, something really, really awesome I love is this ability to now very quickly regen edit a schedule or go straight into a new schedule. So an awesome feature to be able to do, I can click edit, and you'll see on the schedules that didn't have grid lines before, you can now see the grid lines. And what this is doing is any of those schedules that didn't have grid lines, they actually do have grid lines. They are actually still table objects, which was the main thing that we changed here. So when I go to edit a schedule, we found that it was difficult to select a schedule to edit or regen if those table lines weren't on. You had to like click on a symbol or on this line up here. So those lines for the grid lines, when you choose the option to set the schedule to grid lines as non-plot, what they are actually doing is going on the def points layer. So when you go to regen a schedule or edit it, it will turn on the def points layer so that you can easily select a schedule. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and you can see it pop up the new schedule dialog box where you can see all the new options. But very importantly, since I edited this schedule, it's auto-populated with all the options that that schedule used. So I can now go through and just make fine tweaks to make this exactly the schedule that I want in here. And maybe Jer, you and I can kind of talk a little bit more about why we did this, which the big reason that we went to tables and this new schedule dialog box is so that we can put in a lot of these new features that there were a lot of requests for that we really wanted to get in here. And the only way we could do it was getting all the schedules into tables, right?
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, it was multiple things, but things like, giving us the ability for the container size to wrap to multiple lines. It needs to be a table cell to be
Mhm.
able to offer that. And then also just simply the better control of being able to reorder the columns if necessary. And then being able to perfectly size the photo, perfectly scale the symbol, make sure the symbol is perfectly centered in the row. When the schedule was an M-text object, all of that was a huge amount of code trying to estimate and guess where each line of text was lying, as opposed to just simply being a table row. And then, of course, the really big hanging issue was the fact that you have this giant chunk of code that is creating the schedules in M-text, and then you have this other kind of competing chunk of code that was creating the schedule as a table. And so when someone say, I'm having a problem with the schedule, we'd have to go, well, which one is it? You have to know which chunk of code might have the error, if we want to replicate it. And so it just ended up being ridiculous to essentially be maintaining effectively two different schedule functions in one, and one just being very, very limited. And so it was time to just make the switch and just make everything a table. And it gives us um, all kinds of incredible ability. Very, very minor things lost. I mean, really, the only thing lost is, understandably, if you explode a schedule and it's just a blob of M text, that's technically a little quote unquote easier to manually edit. Well, obviously, that's you shouldn't be having to manually edit a schedule anyway, is the thing. And really, when you get into it, and just to learn the little tricks with editing a table manually. Oh, you absolutely can edit a table manually. So there's just no reason to maintain that. So yeah, now everything's a table and completely rewritten from scratch. The code was completely rewritten. It was effectively a 2-year project, which is pretty
Yeah.
crazy. And so it's just a giant undertaking. But what's great is we first did the irrigation schedule, now the plant schedule. Now we're currently working on the RefNote schedule. All of them just having nice, clean, fresh code, very capable, very easy for us to expand on, and out of the gate that allowed us to do the Bloom schedule. So it was just a great example of, once you have this completely rewritten code that's very easy to maintain and expand on, boom, look at that. We were able to do this in barely like a week.
Yeah, this one was a lot of fun to test and to make sure that our plant database was all hooked up to it. You guys haven't checked that out. You can access the bloom schedule over here, where if we pull that up again, it's allowing us to edit or regen that. I'm just going to say new this time, and you can see the options for that bloom schedule. Again, being able to do grid lines non-plot, or if you just uncheck that, they will plot and show all the grid lines, which is a nice feature to have. We do find, though, that if you include the symbol or photos in the bloom schedule, and especially if you're doing everything in there, you really need grid lines non-plot. It just looks the best. Just kind of speaking to that. Again, you can add that photo or that symbol in here, and you have some limited things, but getting some feedback as you guys use this bloom schedule. One thing, since the bloom schedule is new, a lot of the colors, we've been filling in so many colors for so many plants, but we already had 50,000 plants when we released this bloom schedule and all of those color data on the plants. So if you find that as you go through and do a bloom schedule, if there's any of these color bars that are maybe empty or a plant missing, just go into that plant's data when you go into your plant manager. And if I edit one of these plants, or maybe I'll just edit a plant that I know is in here. So if I edit, say, this plant right here, that one might not have any blooming, but if I go over here to the data, you can see the plant colors. We have leaf colors, so that's foliage colors, which is coming up. But then we even have, for non-blooming plants, we have this non-blooming, or you can go in here and set what time of year that this is all set to. And this is all kind of managed by Molly too. So she helps maintain this database for you guys to start adding your plant colors too, so that when you do run that, that bloom schedule, all of your colors come in, and then everybody kind of benefits from that new data in our database. So we have a lot of questions. I know we had some things that we wanted to, do you want to maybe, let's go through these really quick, Jer, to maybe speak to some of the common questions that we've had roll in the last few months with the plant schedule, and some things that we wanted to get some feedback on, and then we'll jump into questions. And it looks like we'll probably spend the rest of the webinar answering all the questions.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, so the first thing that has come up a lot is our header spacing. So we wanted to talk about the progression of this and why we went this way. And one big question has been, why is there this big space no matter what I do between the header, which is a new thing, by the way, in this new table style schedule. We were able to create header text that you can customize over here in your general preferences under the text styles. You can customize what that looks like. So you have that nice bold header text if you want, versus the title text and the just regular schedule text. And the previous look that we had on our non-table style was to have a little bit of a gap above the code and between things to make it very clear. And we found that this was aesthetically nice to be able to have that gap, to make it super clear, all the different sections, very easy to read schedule. Where the way that this bump ended up being this size was, it was actually just a line return, right, Jer? Just a line return between
Correct.
this line and this line. That's what kind of prompted that one space. You can see all of these are line returns, including over here in the table style. But we have had some requests to reduce that. So I think it's this one over here where we've been talking about, okay, so what does it actually look like if we got rid of that bump? Maybe we don't want to be so strict about that as we thought maybe would be ideal. We've been getting some feedback that maybe that's not as ideal, and Jer and I have been talking about this over this last week. just based on these examples of, okay, actually all of these are kind of equal in how they look. And they have pros and cons, right? Because this is very easy to read. This is slightly less easy to read, but it might be easier to read if it's all one column as opposed to needing to be split into 2 columns. So there's some pros and cons there. And I think, Jer, you were kind of starting to see a way to that we might be able to reduce that size, right?
Yeah, that's I think that's the header spacing
Header
options.
spacing options. Okay.
There we go. So I was like, well, it has to be the space has to be controlled with a line break.
Mhm.
But then I found you can't actually use a little M text override for the height of that line break. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize you could do that rather easily. And so then this was a mock-up of how it is existing with the full size line break on the right, no line break at all on the left, and then a half size line break in the middle. And so this is what we were Amanda and I were talking about yesterday, was maybe that's kind of exactly what we need in the schedule dialog box, is a little drop down box for header spacing, or something like that. We'll just notionally call it a header spacing and let it be 0, 0.5, or 1.0. Maybe it even needs 4 possible options. Just simply go right there in the dialog box. So that's what we were kind of playing with yesterday, and it's a good one too. We were even thinking, oh, maybe we'll use this new vote feature and let you guys vote on it, see what you guys think will be best. But basically, we could not, ourselves, decide to just simply make a decision. Should it be completely 1.0 or completely 0.0 for everybody? It just really seems like it needs to be a option for the user. And so just need to basically name the option and give the option variations. So if you guys do have some input on that, please let us know. Yeah, because like I said, we can see someone preferring the zero space option on the left.
Mhm.
um, I personally think it's a little too crunched, and I would pick, now that I see it, I think I'd pick the 0.5 option, which is new, which is not available now. I'm kind of, now that I see that, yeah, that full space on the right, yeah, it is a little too much. I still like it for the visual distinction that it gives.
Mhm.
But that's where we are. And again, we're always improving the software, and these sorts of mock-ups like this help us when we do hear from people saying things like the space is too much. Like, okay, I need you to use your big boy words, and ideally, what are you looking for? And these mock-ups like this, all I did was just mock this up by editing the table directly. So this is something that anyone could have done on their own. Um, and so this really helps us to kind of see, okay, well, this is what the desired end goal is. Let's see if we can engineer that.
Yeah. And then the other thing, I think the last thing we wanted to show just really quickly why we put the plant group name in a separate row. That was a big decision. And we decided to go with this because we had way too many tickets where this was an issue, where people were awesome using the custom plant group names to create custom plant groups to better organize their plants how they want to in their plant schedule. But with it being in the same row, you didn't get this code column header, and it usually bumped this way out, and even just normally bumped it out with just the regular ground covers where you have all this empty space that started taking up a lot. So what we did was we did move it into a separate row in order to just across the board allow whatever header it is to kind of take control. And it has that nice ability because it's merged across, that's very clear that this is a different group. which you can start to play with your table style as to what that header cell looks like. So you can maybe even change it a little bit to be gray with white text or something like that. But you can see it a lot in this schedule over here. So what we actually did while also doing that ability to have that header in another row, is we suppressed these column headers repeating all the way through. So what that does is if we go to, was it plant group and header, it might have been symbol sizes, but with all of that, it actually reduce the size so that even though we are adding that one extra header, it really reduces how many extra rows then get added. But on top of that, we also worked with a little bit of the symbol sizes. So we had obviously a previous feature that allowed this back and forth staggering of the symbols in the drawing style schedule only. However, moving over to a table style schedule for everything, which allows us to put in more features, does not allow us to stagger the plants like that anymore. So what we did was we actually went through and changed how the symbol sizes actually fit inside of here. And we did get some feedback asking for more of a space between so they don't touch. So we did that too. And one of the big things you can totally see through here is, especially when we get to the shrub symbols, this is the old style of schedule over here, where we had that space between to somewhat match the space between all the lines up here. And what we did instead was just have the text align with the symbol. We were able to make the symbol bigger for the shrubs, so more legible. And we were able to just kind of scrunch them up because now this is a whole table. If I go over here under my layer properties and just turn on def points, just so you can see that table, what it is, how we're able to scrunch that up, which actually, when it comes to the shrubs in that schedule, actually ended up with a space savings. So overall, in a full schedule with symbols, you'll probably end up with more legible symbols and probably a vertical space savings, or very, very close to the vertical size that it was before with similar settings. Jer, was there anything else you wanted to kind of cover on this drawing example before we move into questions?
Just yeah, I mean, the main point of this was just, yes, the trees do take up more vertical space.
Mhm.
And so this whole document was just explaining, that was just a kind of a somewhat necessary hit by switching to the table style, but we were able to save space with the shrubs. And so the net size of the schedule should be nearly the same. But obviously we could still make those tree symbols even smaller, but as it is, we wanted them to be distinct from the shrub symbol sizes. And so if the tree sizes were to get smaller, they're going to start to be very similar to the shrub sizes. So
Mhm.
then the shrub sizes probably need to be a little smaller, and so then they're kind of almost too small. So it's a very delicate thing. But another classic example, when someone says, "Hey, the schedule's too tall," um, noted. What would help? Just send in a screenshot of that, please, so we see what you're seeing. If we can, it's sorry, it's just definitely a little frustrating at times because we've gotten hundreds and hundreds of emails regarding the schedule, and when someone just says something like that, the schedule's too tall. I don't know what your schedule looks like.
Mhm.
It literally takes you 5 more seconds to take a screenshot and attach that. Please, for the love of God, it really, really helps. And so then we go, oh, okay, there you go. And in
Mhm.
ones I've seen, they have the symbols at plan size, and there are these giant symbols. And I'm like, that's the same size that the schedule's always has been, when you have that option checked. So it helps us actually address the issue, if you can send that in, and let us kind of go, oh, okay, well, let's see what we're dealing with and see how we might be able to solve that.
Exactly. Oh, and one other thing, if you can even go a little step further, if you have time, like a bare minimum would be send us something with what you had before that you want to get back to and what you have now. But if you can go just that little bit further, just a little bit extra time and include an example beside it of manually like going in here and block editor and showing us by manually editing it how you want this new format in the table style to look. Just that little bit extra can help us see exactly how you would like this format to be translated into this format. That would be great. Okay, so let's see, how should we handle or like approach some of these questions? Where should we start?
Well, I've got a nice, easy, simple one, which would be
Okay.
great because it even involves Molly. This was a really great question. Is they're wondering when and if we're ever going to implement a default size for plants, so that way they already have their symbol size set. I think that would be a great thing to consider for the data. What do you think
Mhm.
about that, Molly?
Yeah, so is that a default size for the symbol based on the data that's for the plant? Is that
Correct. Kind of
Yeah.
a default. Typically, it's typically about a 5-year mature symbol width.
Mhm.
Well, 5 to 10. I'd say a bit closer
Correct.
to 10. Although there is sometimes that thing with like the very large shade trees where we don't really want a mature width that gets up to 100 and something feet to show on the plan as 50 feet wide.
Yeah, exactly. It's a delicate uh, thing of what should that be, and that's obviously why we've always had it as a preference of the designer. But definitely duly noted. And I totally forgot who asked the question, but like they mentioned, it definitely would save some time
Mhm.
to have a default come in.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Mhm.
And so yeah, that would be something that we would task Molly with, is kind of making that judgment call, and we kind of give her the guidelines of like Amanda was just saying. So given this is a great example, you're right. Even though it says mature is 25 to 40, what should that default be? Should it be on the 25 side? Should it be 30? Where should it, or should it even be 20? Just because to be a little bit lower than the fully mature size. That's the dilemma.
I'm wondering maybe we do it like 0.75 across the board of
Mhm.
the upper range of that mature width, and then at least it's coming in at that as a default, and people can then obviously they would know they can still edit this symbol width after the fact, after it's imported. But yeah, that would get them kind of part of the way there, especially for shrubs. That would be super helpful for shrubs.
Totally. Yeah, I think that would be awesome.
Okay, I like that
Cool.
on the list.
Great.
We had another one. I don't know. I mentioned that right as we were about to start, Amanda. That one question about kind of XREFing the plan in so that you can kind of isolate a colorized version
Right.
versus the black and white. I don't know if that's going to be take too long to kind of
I don't
experiment
think so.
with.
Um, so the question was to have a bit of the plan shows black and white and a bit shows color, right?
That's
I
right.
understand. Okay, so the solution to that one would be to have this plan, but then do a save as. If my computer will let me go. So do a save as and call it something like color. So if I go color and save, and now this is a totally new drawing. And then what we do is you can run that color render over here. So I'm just going to run that on this plan. with everything. I've already set up everything. So I'm going to say on. And for those who have not used color render yet, you can kind of watch it work. We've set colors to everything, and it does it in order. So it starts with the ground covers and shrub areas, so the hatches, and then it does the small shrubs, then the large shrubs, then the small trees, and then the large trees, because all of our trees and shrub color symbols have transparency to them. So by doing it in that order, you get the right arrangement so everything looks okay. So then with this all set up, we would go ahead and save that now color drawing. And we want to XREF that back into that original one. So if I open up that original one again, now I would personally actually have a separate drawing with my landscape layout tab in it. In this example that I have, just for webinar purposes, they're all together, just so I don't have too many drawings open at once during a webinar. But I would actually then have a separate DWG just for the landscape layout tab that I would XREF this 2D drawing in with the into that DWG, and XREF the color drawing into that DWG as well. But in this case, I'm just going to import the color version into here. So I'm going to go ahead and do an FXREF. And I'm going to go to my desktop, webinars. Here we go. CAD. And here is my color one. So if I go ahead and open up that and import it, that's going to appear. I'm probably going to put it, it might be above, it might be below. I'll put it above. And I'm going to make sure that this path is relative and that it's an overlay. And the units all match, so that's okay. I'm going to say okay, and then we can go to my landscape plan. And I think I have some, so let's just make this section in color, just to kind of show how that works. So if I go into this viewport, I can use my new viewport tool. So what this actually does is isolate a portion of a viewport to make that visible as well as the other viewport. So that's what it's doing. So I can select that one, and it's going to create a viewport that is the shape of that work area. So I've already set up that work area. And now I can go into this main viewport out here, and I believe you can do Control R to switch between viewports now that they're nested like this. But in this main viewport, I can control the layer visibility separate from this nested viewport down here. If I go back out, you can see this nested viewport right in here. So if I go in here and in my layer property manager, I can, when you're in a viewport, if you're not aware, you have this viewport visibility, viewport freeze, different from the main drawing freeze. So right now, a lot of things are showing in one and not the other. So I probably want to swap the layers that are showing in one versus the other. Normally we do this where yeah, like Jer said, you would actually bring them in, maybe the 2D into the color drawing and show it that way. But you can see how this is now 2D and everything else is 3D because it's showing for or not 3D color, because it's showing for everything different. It's kind of, and it's also putting a slight transparency around everything around the work area I did new viewport on. But I won't go too much further into that, like going through and actually changing all the layers, because I have to go find them. Might be good to, I think that answers it, so we can go on to another question.
Great. We got a couple of questions. It'd be great to just also show and remind people of some of these new features, namely the column order feature and then also the subtotal feature.
Okay, yeah. So here in this drawing, I have an example over here where I've created, I I actually have an all work areas that has subtotals. But if you wanted to do a subtotal, so I'll go to schedule and I'm going to do a new schedule, and let's do both at the same time. So I can do subtotals is right here, and that's going to subtotal all of my plant groups separately. So it will subtotal if you have, I'll show you what it does for the different plant groups in here, but it will subtotal them separately. So if I do that, and then I can also do column order. So a common request is to have the quantity before the name. So all I have to do is grab that and pop it above. Now, we did discuss this of how we would allow this and decided that it would be best for the costs and cost totals to always follow the quantity. So it just like would make sense what that cost and that cost total were related to, that they were related to the quantity. Same with photo symbol code, that they would always be right next to each other, and size and spacing would always be right next to each other. So that's how that's organized. And you can actually then see a breakdown example down here of what it's going to look like. And what quantity A means and quantity Z, those two mean for if I do an all work areas schedule. So it will show the total quantity first and then quantity A and like work area A, work area B, C, D, and then cost. That's how it's organizing everything. So I'm going to say okay to that. And I'm going to get rid of this just so it's not too wide on this example. Symbol and code. Let's just do code so that you guys can see that really easily on the screen. And I'm just going to do an entire drawing for this one. And let's pop that down. I'm actually going to move it. So I'm grabbing that top right in order to move the whole table. We added that into there. So you can see what it is doing in here. And you can see actually how the remarks are wrapping as well. That might be something good to talk about. So these remarks, actually, first, let's focus on the question. We got the subtotal, so you can see the subtotal now. The quantity is over there because the quantity got moved before the name. The subtotal, though, is always in the name column, specifically whichever name is first. And it is that way because like we know that there's always going to be a name column. So that's where we put the subtotal. I think there was some ideas on maybe how to display the subtotal so it looks a little better if the quantity is before the name, but most of the time if you have this this setup and you actually want a subtotal like that, it's probably going to be better to put the quantity after the name just so it looks correct.
Well, you can just do the subtotal, including the colon, is in language strings, so you
it
can
is.
edit it there.
That's
Yeah.
right. I forgot about that. Thank you. So by that, what Jer means is if I go to general preferences and go to language strings, we have subtotal down here. So you can change that to say like subtotal instead, and say okay. And I'm going to say okay to my preferences, and then I'll just schedule and regen this. And there, that has changed over here. So it can be more clear. Thanks for that. But let's see. So that's all organized how we want. Let me talk a little bit about the remarks. So this auto sizes itself, this column, and it's going to auto size itself based on the first name column. That's correct, right, Jer? So that it will size itself. If you actually have botanical and common name in separate columns, it will size itself based on the botanical column and then wrap long remarks as needed.
Actually, it'll be actually whichever one is wider.
Whichever one is wider? Oh, awesome. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that clarification. So that's how that works in case you notice it being different widths with different organizations or in different drawings. So it's going with whatever has the widest name, the widest plant name. And as we go through here, you can see how things are organizing. I know one thing that has come up has been spacing. And actually, most of the time that spacing is a question has been people have accidentally or purposefully made a spacing as a plant size and they end up with 2 spacing columns, and that's just what's happening there. Is you got to decide between either using spacing as a plant size or this spacing checkbox here. And the spacing checkbox here for shrub areas and ground covers obviously relates to the spacing in your shrub areas and ground covers here in the Plant Manager. But if you check spacing for shrubs, it will correspond to the actual shrub symbol width if you check this spacing column. Another thing that we added, I forgot to mention, was canopy. So this will actually show up in here. So if I go here and yeah, I'll just do that and see what happens. Let's go there. So the canopy column will actually organize itself above the spacing column. So that just shows the canopy size, again, relating to the actual symbol size that you have chosen for that tree. So you can then use this canopy to send off to Excel spreadsheet and do any canopy calculations that are needed for municipality needs. Okay, let's move on to next question.
You bet. Got a couple good ones. One just as a good ponder point, Catherine mentioned that they would prefer to have the plant groups not be ordered alphabetically.
Okay.
And actually, I can't remember. Did we didn't implement that, right? In the group, can you drag and drop the ordering? I can't remember if we
I think we
implemented
did.
that.
I know we did so much that sometimes it's hard to keep track. But if I grab this guy and just drag and drop him, it's thinking. It's letting me do it. Let's see.
Oh boy.
Nope. Oh, it did it, but it's getting a little confused by
There
me
we go.
clicking around. So
There
yes,
we
you
go.
can drag and drop it. It's probably me sharing over Zoom that's having a little bit of internet blip. Because this is when you drag and drop it down, it is actually saving to your preferences. And on Cloud Data, which is the best place to be, that's what it's doing. That's what it was waiting for. And I'm just using a lot of internet with showing
Well,
over
it should
Zoom
be,
as well.
and sometimes I believe it's actually might just be the first one you do has a little bit of a hit. But you could try dragging another one. See,
Yeah,
it's
that went
there.
way faster there.
Yeah.
So you do want to do that drag drop, and you can order these however you want.
There we go. And then another drag drop question, similarly, for the concept groups, Brian was just mentioning that he's had difficulty with the drag drop for reordering the concept groups, and do understand, like you just saw with Amanda, we are constrained, unfortunately, by the system that we use to design these dialog boxes, and agreed the drag and drop is not as precise and as ideal as we'd like. It is there. I don't know if we can try to find, you kind of drag it to where you want it.
Yeah, see, it didn't quite grab that.
Right.
So maybe I don't know, can you add that little line? Or is that line only available in the system that you use to make the
well, let's say I think I should
the
be able to
preferences?
add the line. I'm gonna, basically, take a look at that.
Great
So
question.
that was a
Okay.
very, very good question.
We're coming up with a lot of development items off of this. Okay.
Exactly. Let's see. Well, in this one, It's good. I'm just going to read it. I think we kind of need more clarification, but Brianna asks if it's possible to show the quantity of plants, but not the area of the concept areas when you select quantity. And like, I would just kind of need more clarification of why.
Oh, I see. Like, wait, so they
And
want, do I have one that has, oh, I have birds and berries shrub mix over here.
yeah,
So they want to not see this total square footage of the birds and berries shrub mix. They want to only see the individual plants inside of it.
yeah. The only way we have that currently is you would have to include concept plants by plant, not by
Yeah.
group.
Yeah.
But then they won't be organized by the group.
Mhm.
Yeah, but Brianna, if you could, maybe give us a little more clarification of what you're dealing with. Do you need them to still be in the group? You just don't want the square footage there as a reason why. I mean, just a little more depth of that is going to help us appreciate what you're dealing with and see what we can do.
Yep. I mean, in a pinch, you can always add a wipeout over it, and over top of the whole thing, so that when it regenerates, at worst, you are just moving that wipeout up and down. So that's a very quick fix. But if we get more information, if this is really a heavy need of moving this out, we can see what we can do about it. Oh, Brianna said yes, exactly. Contractors often find that the square footage is confusing.
There we go.
Okay. Okay. We'll have to see, maybe Brianna, would you be able to kind of think about that and think how you would want to be able to control that somewhere, like where you'd want to be able to control it and how, given that we are not going to be able to just turn it off entirely, because there's a lot of situations where that is very helpful. So if you could give us some ideas on that. I have some ideas, but I'd like to hear yours.
And then let's see here. Oh, and Brianna also mentions that she's getting the plant data options when she edits it are not sticking. I will just get that noted.
Okay.
It's
Oh, it
supposed
looks like
to.
Brianna also asked, is there a way to combine plant schedule and concept schedule into a single schedule? I'm not sure if you already saw that, Brianna, but if I go over to schedule and I'm going to go to new, there's this button over here, include concept plants by group. So that's how you get those concept mixes, especially into the main schedule, if that is checked like that. Just want to make that clear.
And let's see here. I'm looking through trying to find another question here. The schedule header, that was a good one. Jarrett asks if there's going to be an ability to set the schedule header text or color or background. And that was part of creating the schedule header, was absolutely that desire. And we were just basically kind of wondering where and how to kind of put it in there, because it would be exactly where Amanda's showing. You would go to edit the schedule header, and then kind of only the schedule header would need an additional ability to set a background color. But it sounds like Jarrett wants to set a text color, which we have not heard of. So yet another great example. Jarrett, please send us an example. He says he's having to do it manually. Well, do it manually one more time and send that example to us. It really helps us to just see exactly what you're hoping to create.
I have an idea of what he might be after. So if I go to modify, so with these plant schedules, they are actually table styles in here. So if I modify that table style and I go into here, you can see I have data and I have header and title, and we are actually using the cell style of header for that header section. So I can change the fill color in here, and I don't want to do it by block. Let's say I want it black.
Correct.
And
And then make the text white. Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, go over here to text, and instead of by block, I can make that, I'm going to actually go to a true color, and I'm going to crank that up to white, and I'm going to say white.
Oh, that didn't hold.
It what?
See, it's set to black.
Oh, whoops.
You have to click it twice. It's a beautiful little Microsoft bug that they have never fixed.
Or I can type it in 255, 255.
Yeah.
I can force the computer to do my will. And I'm gonna say, okay, there we go, white. And I'm gonna say, okay, and close. And that should, did that update those? I definitely tested that before. Let's see if it'll do it on a new schedule. New and include concept plants. I'm just going to do that so that these are in there. Okay. There we go. So that's how you can do it. So what you can do if you want that to stick, I think it might be something, it was something that we were talking about, Jer, of like being able to save that table style into the preference set, kind of like how we allow saving the dim style.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's and of course the
But
other workaround is just simply have that be in your AutoCAD DWT template,
yeah,
or even just a block you insert where it's has that table style defined.
yeah, just do this and copy it into your template file, and that will bring in that table style without having to set the Land Effects project or anything. You'll get this table style, it will define, and then Land Effects will just keep using it if it's already defined in that template. Awesome. There's some feedback on really needing to compress the plant schedules to and setting the space to 0 because they want to squish some things down. So that is great feedback and kind of speaks to what we wanted to do with that header size. So thank you for that that input. Let's see, kind of going through these questions. I'm not sure if you had any lined up or if Molly, you saw any questions that you wanted to speak to directly.
Yeah, I saw one actually.
Okay.
Michael Polano. I actually am not sure I have the answer, but it says, sorry if this was already asked. Could you walk through how to add custom columns? Many times jurisdictions or certifications lead, for example, require us to identify what plants are natives, pollinators, etc. on the schedules.
Awesome. Okay, so I think with that one, the best one, so I would put native. You could put it 2 ways. The way that I really like to show native is actually over here in the plant sizes. And adding a column into here and just calling it native and putting the yes, no down here to be able to choose, just like you choose the sizes over here. Now you will want to, once you do it here, you want to go to shrub areas and ground covers and do it the same. And very importantly, you want that new column to be the same user field across all 4 of these, especially for native, because Land Effects is just recognizing this as user field 3. It does not actually know what you're typing in here. So it will organize all field 3s above other field 3s in the schedule. And so this way, if all of your native columns are in field 3, they'll all show up over top of each other in the schedule for all of your plants. That is, I think, the easiest way. And then you can kind of customize what plant says yes or no based on the plants that you're using in certain areas. And maybe even change it if you have a wide range of projects across even different countries where different plants are native. So you can kind of customize your plant templates to respect what is native and what's not. Now, if you're okay with it saying where it's actually native to, we do have, if I edit, oh, that's not going to be native to anywhere. This one over here, Cercis canadensis, if I edit that one, you can see in the plant data, most plants will have plant origin in here. And what you can do is if I run a plant schedule, I'm going to do a new plant schedule. Jared will have to look at the memory on this one. And then let's go to plant data. And I'm going to check native. Sorry, not native, plant origin over here. So I'm going to group it, and you can see what that looks like. Separate columns just makes a whole bunch of columns that are checked. And that's definitely a way that some people like to show it, but I like to show it grouped. So I'm going to say OK. And I'm just going to do the entire palette and we're going to see what that looks like. So that gave me a schedule that shows all of the locations that that plant is native to based on the data in that plant. And of course, since this is a table, I can block edit this and just grab that cell, that column, and pull it in to manually have it wrap at a certain point, but it's going to organize, it's going to auto size itself to the longest entry at the moment. But it's very easy to then just go in and rewrap it. So those are the two ways that I would do it. I do know that some people have been putting in, if I go over back into editing this plant, some people have been using our portal data. You can add a custom data option down here. This is just a test, but you can name this native and say yes, no. I don't like that option, again, because of that scenario that I mentioned where a plant can be native in one area and not another. And so I wouldn't necessarily go there because it kind of shoehorns you into just your one specific location and would be troublesome if your business expanded. You'd have to totally change how you're doing things. So those other two ways are ideal. Looks like we have a little bit of time left. If there's any other questions, I don't know, Molly or Jared, did you see any that we should definitely hit?
Definitely still, still definitely a wide variety of opinions on the header, like we thought. People wanting it the way it was, people wanting no header at all, people wanting the irrigation header to not reprint. Definitely a wide variety of options. I'm still kind of waiting for one. They didn't want the header to reprint when for ground covers, even though it has to for the spacing column. And I mean, that to me is a classic example. I have to reprint that header if it changes. So if there's a spacing column for ground cover, there has to be a header there. So when people say, I want to remove that header, again, I don't know what you want. You gotta show me what you want. Like, how are you expecting to identify the spacing column without a header? I mean, it's a classic conundrum. I mean, Amanda, I remember you had a mock-up, when we were developing, and you had a mock-up where any single column, if it was the same, it would not print that. And so in that example, only the word spacing would appear because that was the only change to the header as it switched to ground covers. And I thought it just looked wrong. I thought it looked like it was a mistake to have just the word spacing over on the right and all the rest of the header being blank. And besides, you're not gaining anything because you're not able to completely remove that header. So my philosophy is if you gotta have to print the header, the whole header should print. But so, definitely a lot of opinions on it. And just again, I'm going to emphasize, if you spend a couple of minutes kind of showing us what your ideal would be, that helps a lot more than, a 5-word sentence.
Totally agree. 100%. Just helps us understand your point of view and kind of relate it to where we're coming from and find the best path forward.
And then we had someone ask about how to do existing plants in a schedule. And I would offer, if you have to have it in the schedule, there's generally kind of two generalized options. One would be my preference. I would place them into the XREF. so that way I could halftone it
Yeah, definitely have
automatically.
them in the XREF. Yeah.
But in either case, you are going to want to create a group called existing plants so that then they're also grouped in the schedule as well. So whether or not they're uh, in the XREF.
I had a power tip with some ideas on existing tree massing. And I also have a webinar. I'm trying to remember the name of it at the moment. Maybe if I see all webinars. So I'm just on our website. I went to help and I just going to resources and over to webinars. I think it was, if I see the image, I'll recognize it. Here we go. Tree remediation plans also had some ideas on how to organize your, yeah, those existing plant inventories, if that's how far you want to go with it. And then, Jer, I think we were kind of discussing just in the background on how many more questions we should probably go, since we are at the hour mark right now. And
Yeah, I think it was a few more. We can go ahead and boy, time
okay,
sure does fly. Catherine asked, didn't they want quantity first, but they want cost and total to not be at the front. And I just don't see that being a viable option. Cost and quantity and total are all related, and just they need to be right next to each other. I'm just not appreciate it. Personally, I just feel it highlights, where quantity should go, and it just makes that, at that point, it's really not a very viable place to put the quantity first. Because it is intimately related to not only if you have multiple work areas, you might have multiple quantity columns, just like this shows. And so, yeah, so it's quantity, cost, and total. You can see it moves multiple columns together because they're all related. And so and that's why that we engineered that column order dialog box to try to make it very clear to the user that this is what it's going to look like when you move these around. But I just think it would be wildly more confusing to
yeah,
move the unit cost and total away from quantity.
ignore me playing with my my
Yeah.
units. Great
It's like,
British pounds.
are you
Uh,
thinking of moving?
no. But this is kind of the extreme situation that we had in mind when we grouped them together, of like, are we going to allow those unit costs and totals to be separated if we're also allowing this to happen? I mean, I guess there is an argument that we got to let people fail in, or fail in their own way, make mistakes in our eyes, but maybe is not a mistake in their eyes. So if anybody has some extra feedback on that, and some examples of how you normally do it and how it's acceptable in a lot of places, then I mean, we're always open to more feedback about that.
And I think just maybe a couple more. Someone asked, is there a way to place a schedule on a plan and be able to block out the plan underneath? And that's an intriguing idea to have that kind of built in. We could kind of add an option that says add a background for the whole schedule, but
Yeah.
also it's easy enough to do manually. Just simply create a little either a wipeout or a solid fill
Actually, the
behind
way
it.
I normally do it is I would go ahead and do a viewport clip. So what you can do when you do a viewport is you can actually draw a polyline to the shape that you want to cut out of the viewport. And then you can do a viewport clip. So I think the command is VP clip. VP clip. And you can choose you can draw a polygon or select an object, and it will actually clip the viewport to the shape that you want. And if you place, like I have over here, I've actually placed, this was one of the other questions that had come up, of how do you do I think it was a question about annotative text in a schedule, and our solution that we offered was uh, just put the schedule on the layout space. You can totally do that. So this one's on the layout space, and if I wanted to kind of move it over here and actually have it overlap a little bit, but cut out a corner to have it in there, you can do that viewport clip around around this viewport to give it the space it needs. That's the way I would do it.
And at least one more really good question. Mara asked for, they want to be able to do formulas, which is very intriguing. It's something we've pondered, is to be able to have a user field literally be a formula.
Yeah,
And so the only dilemma is I just don't know if I'd want to use up one of those precious user fields. And it almost seems like that might, and of course, it might just be better do that through the plant data engine, where now, of course, it's a lot easier to kind of choose which ones you want and gives us a little more control of the editing of the formula and such. I just
it
wouldn't
does. It
necessarily
gives
want
you more
to.
controls on the website,
Yeah.
which gives us more freedom.
But absolutely something that we have been pondering, and that's a thanks for bringing that up, Mara.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're gonna have to click pause. Everybody, if we didn't get to your question enough, I'm sorry, this was wildly successful. Please feel free to send us an email. Like I said, send us these mock-ups, send us these screenshots. That really helps us. And we will certainly be having another of these Ask Us Anything. I don't know if the next one will be, kind of focused on plant schedules, but we'll see. Please, any feedback you can give us on this little webinar and on schedules in general, and always helps. It helps us more to see what you're seeing, to appreciate the situation you're dealing with. Is always key. That's, as you can see, how many times have we mentioned that? That's really key. We want the context and we want to see the example, and that's just going to give us everything, so that we can best deal with your ideas. But other than that, my gosh, everyone, have a fantastic weekend, and I very much hope to see you at the next webinar.